Withhold not your truth or kindness, Lord. Withhold not your truth or kindness, Lord.
Welcome to The Notice, where together we notice the mercy of God. I'm Susan Hoekstra, your host. The Notice podcast explores our need to be noticed through biblical musings and conversations with special guests. Experience relevant topics and encouragement as we take notice of how the God of mercy satisfies. On this episode of The Notice, do you ever feel overstimulated? Do you wish you could just get away from it all and be somewhere where you can just connect with all your senses? Join me on this episode of The Notice, where I discuss our senses, how our culture affects our sense of well-being. We even talk about self-awareness and just how taking notice of God just makes sense. My heart started pounding as the sand peeked through each of my toes. In just a few more steps, I would be on the shores of beautiful Lake Michigan. Basking in the sound of the waves, the backdrop of the Manitou Islands and Sleeping Bear Dunes engulfed me. I smelled the fresh air and felt the wind on my face. I felt the touch of the waves on my ankle, and I could sense my senses coming alive. Calmness emerged in my very next breath. Ah, pure Michigan. Home. Being God's creation becomes home for many of us. We can't wait to get away to our favorite spot. Perhaps these experiences awaken our five senses of sight, sound, smell, taste, and touch. Connecting with our senses restores us, and it invites us to linger. One can't help but get lost in the silence of the woods at wintertime or the sound of a waterfall. The smell of lilacs, the taste of a fresh strawberry, or the touch of the wind on our face can provide a special kind of healing. And if we're among God's creation, our senses can't help but help us take notice of Him. Yet in our culture, let's face it, we don't sense that calmness, and we can't always get away. Instead of our senses coming alive, we find our senses overstimulated by the unnatural. Our sense of hearing may become overloaded if we're surrounded by loud noise or if you're hearing multiple sounds at once. Everyday things like the feeling of your clothes or the texture of certain materials might also make you feel uncomfortable. And many people experience some kind of sensitivity to light, especially when they are subjected to harsh or overwhelming amounts of light. Or the lack of sunlight can even produce seasonal affective disorder. A person whose sense of smell is over-responsive or highly sensitive might find strong smells like perfume overwhelming. Some even feel sick if they're around too many strong smells. And your taste buds can be overwhelmed by foods with strong flavors or specific spices. The temperature of certain foods can be overwhelming as well. So with all these bright lights, loud noises, TVs blaring, and constant contact with our mobile devices, it's really no wonder we're stressed. A 2014 Nielsen report found that adults log a total of 11 hours of screen time a day. This much screen time can affect our weight, vision, sleep, can lead to chronic neck and back pain, and actually impair cognitive function. I know when I'm out in nature, I'm reminded how much simple parts of God's creation satisfy. And yet, I'm also someone who recognized early my tendency towards this sensory overload. I remember when one of my daughters was a baby. Every time I would take her grocery shopping, she would get so unsettled. It didn't matter if she was fed, changed, or had my attention. She just wasn't a happy baby. I started noticing a pattern, and I also began to notice something else. The minute I would take her outside to the car and put her in the car, she calmed down as if by magic. She's an adult now, and to this day, she still gets overstimulated easily. I too am someone who gets sensory overload, particularly like in a shopping mall. There's the sounds, visual stimuli, the smells of the cinnamon-covered nuts, the feeling of the different textures of fabrics, and not being able to hear other people talk with resonance can put me over the top. And you don't want me on a school bus with small children. This sound is like squeaking chalk on a chalkboard to me. But you'll find me happy to sit by the lake, hearing the waves crash, or in the winter woods cross-country skiing. And just like magic, I too am restored. Friends, I know I'm not alone. The need for this kind of restoration is so relevant that businesses create candles to smell like the ocean. They create ocean sounds, pictures, and videos that mimic these natural God-given experiences. Then there's the massages, spas, and pedicures, or just some examples of the self-care industry. And now here's the irony. We go to these places in the name of self-care. Instead of noticing God as creation, what is it that we're hoping to satisfy? Are we looking to connect to our senses or maybe avoid them? I'm not sure about you, but for me, inevitably when I do something nice like get a massage, I get a sense that I don't do enough to take care of myself. And so I'll just book the next appointment. What I hope will be self-care actually becomes something else. I like to call this something else the sixth sense. It's our sense of self, our self-awareness. Author K.L. Toth reminds us, one of the greatest tragedies in life is to lose your own sense of self and accept the version of you that is expected by everybody else. From personal experience, I have had moments where I lost myself. I usually did this by setting inappropriate boundaries, trying too hard to win someone over, or opting to take the high road. In all these instances, I anchored myself in what I could contribute to the situation so someone could perceive me well. In essence, I lost myself when I took my eye off God and others and centered on me. Doing something in the name of self-care only made me more self-aware. Let's talk about what Jesus said in Matthew 19:19. He commands us to love our neighbor as ourselves. I'm not sure about you, but this concept confused me for the longest time. What was it that Jesus was really saying? Although Jesus was asked who his neighbor was, no questions were asked about what as yourself really meant. I think most of us explain this verse by referencing Luke 16:23 that says, "Do to others as you would have them do to you." I get it. Perhaps Jesus didn't need to tell us to love ourselves. Perhaps he assumed we would do that already. After all, why wouldn't we take care of ourselves? And the self-care industry tells us that we really want to do that. Instead, I wonder if Jesus might be talking about being aware of our relationship with self. Are you aware you have a relationship with yourself? And how are the two of you getting along? As I reflect on my own relationship with myself, I wonder, do I love myself? I wonder if all this talk about self-care, was that what Jesus was talking about? Friends, make no mistake, the self-care industry is huge, and a big part of the industry's message is this: you can't take care of others until you take care of yourself. So treat yourself. You're entitled. You deserve it. But is that really true? Think back to when I was a mom. I had little sleep, yet I still got up and fed my baby. I also remember sacrificing vacations so my kids could get music lessons. And I think about the time I go to work and I don't really feel like it. And last year during COVID, somehow, I got through 6 or so months without a haircut or a massage. So just what was Jesus implying by this as yourself? In my book, A Firm Grasp, I don't think Jesus is commanding us to love ourselves. Like I said, he assumed we did. I would suggest that perhaps he's talking about self-awareness. This is more than just self-consciousness. Self-awareness is being able to take a real look at ourselves and where we're at, both good and bad. And for example, that happens to me when I get a massage. This self-awareness kicks in. I'm aware that I have tension in my life and I carry it mostly in my shoulders. I suggest that if we do it right, the beauty of self-care isn't so much about selfishness. It's taking time to become more aware of self. I think Jesus is saying we will continue to struggle to love others with the love of God if we don't know how to receive it for ourselves. So as you explore what stimulates your senses, both positively and negatively, are you aware of where you're at with your relationship with God? Let's go back to the first part of Jesus' command. He said, to love the Lord your God with all your heart, all your soul, all your mind, all your body, and all your strength. How do we do that? Well, I got some tips from Scripture. Romans 10:17 says, so faith comes by hearing, and hearing by the word of Christ. Isaiah 28:23 says, give ear and hear my voice. Listen and hear my words. Psalm 19:1-4 says, the heavens declare the glory of God. The skies proclaim the work of his hands. Day after day they pour forth speech. Night after night they display knowledge. There is no speech or language where their voice is not heard. Their voice goes out into all the earth, their words to the ends of the world. 1 John 4:12 tells us, no one has seen God at any time, but if we love one another, God abides in us, and his love is perfected in us. 2 Corinthians 2:15 says, for we are the aroma of Christ to God among those who are being saved and among those who are perishing. And perhaps my favorite is Psalm 34:8. Oh, taste and see that the Lord is good. Blessed is the man who takes refuge in him. Friends, God made us and understands that our senses are a gateway to take refuge in him. As we become more self-aware, we not only become more aware of others, we become more aware of God and what God is doing. So I say to you, go ahead, connect with your senses. Go to the beach. It's a gateway to connect with God. But don't forget what it's all about. It's about the sixth sense, your sense of self, your self-awareness, which is the best way to fulfill God's command. In the meantime, I'm going to ask you to take the next couple minutes and just be still and use one of those senses, listening, and listen to one of the songs I wrote. Allow your senses to listen. Allow yourself to feel your breath. Perhaps you're not at the ocean, but better still, as you enter into God's presence, I promise, that's all the self-care you'll need.
I am he that comforts you. I am bread of life. I am meek and lowly. I am King of kings. Be still and know that I am God. Be still. Be still.
this time on Ask the Host. My question comes from Sarah, who asks, during this pandemic, I've been struggling to see God in any of it. How am I to take notice if nothing changes? Well, Sarah, thanks for your question. I know COVID has been a challenge for all of us. As a nation, as a generation, we've never experienced anything like it. Being isolated, it's easy to get apathetic and easy to think God isn't paying attention to us at all. The first question I might ask myself is, what is it you're expecting of God? For example, are you expecting Him to stop the pandemic? Many times we have a difficult time noticing God because we have decided what it is God should be doing about the situation. I'm reminded of Isaiah 55, 8-9, which says, "For my thoughts are not your thoughts, neither are your ways my ways, declares the Lord. As the heavens are higher than the earth, so are my ways higher than your ways, and my thoughts than your thoughts." The reality is that we just don't know what God will do. What we do know are His promises. As Angie Ballman mentioned in the last podcast episode, God has promised us two things, that He loves us and that He'll be with us. So I would encourage you to take notice of finding ways He loves you. Maybe you needed something at the store, and when you went to get it, there was only one of them left. Maybe that was God noticing you. A God loves me moment because only He knew you needed it. Maybe you can't meet in person with your friends, but you decided to have a cooking party over FaceTime where you all cook the same meal and share it with each other. This was the first time your friend tried this recipe, and she loved it. The joy and laughter on her face could be God's way of showing Himself to you. Sarah, there's no way we can understand these big things like pandemics. We don't have that level of knowledge, nor, if we're really honest, we don't want that level of responsibility either. Instead, when we start taking notice of God in the little things, we remember His promise that He is with us during the big ones. Until next time, take notice.
True.